Some might hate that they focusing on Emily and Daniel again, but for me season 3 was that good because they dive full in soap opera again. So I loved this opening, though it is very cheesy and full of cliches. First of all, Emily comparing marrying Daniel to war, and then the big chess game at the roof. I also enjoyed the style of the scene and Emily's different look. She is wearing a ponytail again, which we saw on her at the beginning of season 1 more often. Then this beautiful black dress with the black earrings. She looks like a black widow that is lurking for her prey. In this case Daniel, who is totally overwhelmed by this. I think she and the writers tried to recreate the magic of Daniel's proposal in season 1. But this one is different because he did not propose to her and she is just accepting his second attempt from the last episode. I like how he refers to Emily's devilish grin. If he only knew what she is really capable of, he would not be that playful at all. However, I like how fast they got this intimate and trusting again. Seems as if they knew each other a decade, not only 2 years. I cannot say what she had in mind with Paris. Did she really want to live with Daniel there? Since season 1, as Emily tried to get rid of Fomanda, we know that she has an apartment in Paris, so she knows the city and surely can speak French fluently. Spoiler alert, something we get to know in season 3 when Emily talks with Pascal. So she would have no problem living there. Besides, how does she want to fulfill her revenge plan when she is nowhere near the Graysons? Or wear the tickets only to spend time in Paris during their honeymoon? Would have been the perfect destination since Paris is the city of love. Did she bank on the fact that Daniel would not go because he is now CEO of Grayson Global, or because his mother Victoria would find a way to hinder them? Anyway, for me this was way too risky, and her reaction in season 1 to Daniel's idea living in Paris was just right by telling him no. But at least for the moment she is making Daniel happy. Maybe that was her goal. About Daniel and Emily telling Victoria and Conrad the good news. Again, this gets never old how Victoria reacts to Emily. Her look is just priceless, as Nolan would say. And her commentary, it is repetitious, shows how she must struggle to retain her composure. I like how Emily revels again in spreading the news that she and Daniel would only take their honeymoon in Paris but plan to live there. Seems they are both united in teasing Daniel's parents. How good would this scene work if she and Daniel would really be plotting together her revengenda against his parents? Sorry, but such scenes always remind me of my wish for the next season. Spoiler alert, till they introduced Sarah and all the mess around the wedding. I really hoped she would open up as a last desperate attempt to save the wedding and get Daniel on her side. Telling is Conrad's reaction. He really seems to like Emily. A little foreshadow on the tight relationship between Emily and her father-in-law at the beginning of season 3. If you think about it, it is really odd how fast Conrad finds a soft spot for Emily in his heart. Unlike Victoria, who sensed from that start that something was not right with Emily, Conrad was in the same way as Daniel fooled by the facade and image Emily created. Daniel's comments about bastard children and his attitude towards Victoria is really rude, though I enjoy that Daniel finally sees his parents how they really are. It was some kind of unpleasant see him be that unforgiving and abrasive. About Daniel firing Aiden. This was surprising for me, because I truly cannot understand why this comes up now and not when Aiden was introduced. Aiden did not change his name cause, as he told Takeda in the last episode he wanted to make sure that his sister Colleen could find him, cause though she was still alive. So why makes Daniel a fuss about it now? The background check he made should have showed this connection, since Trevor Mathis has the same last name as Aiden. Either the Human Resources Department or anyone else who made that background check were not as good as they claim to be. Or Daniel did just give a damn about such things and hired Aiden instead. So why be that surprised and angry about this detail? Aiden did not lie to me or disguised anything. He just did not tell him right away who his father was. And why should he with such a family history? No one peddles around with that. Anyway, I think it was a convenient way for Daniel to get rid of Aiden, and he just makes this up. 'Cause he might be afraid that Aiden could be still interested in Emily. What is funny that he is almost right with his accusations. Because Aiden was going after the initiative and just wanted the job at Grayson Global to get nearer to Helen and later Trask, not only to help Emily with her revengenda but to take revenge for Colleen's death. So Daniel is not that paranoid here, but it is a clever defense strategy for Aiden to play dumb when it comes to the initiative. Too bad that it did not help, since Daniel already made up his mind about Emily and Charlotte. Finally, a new scene with the two. Besides the stuff in season 3 and 4, this was my favorite scene of the two. 'Cause Emily finally tries to be somewhat like a sister to Charlotte. And her idea of making Charlotte her bridesmaid and invite her to Paris was just so sweet. I bet she would have liked to show Charlotte all her favorite spots of the city. By the way, I love Charlotte's outfit in this scene. Floral patterns like the poppies on this skirt fit her always good. And the white blouse with ruffles harmonizes nicely with her bedspread. Her style in this season was more bold, like in season 1. I loved her coat in the last episode with the floral pattern. Seems as if she is too copying some of Victoria's outfits in this season, like Emily does with Victoria's dresses. It was sad that Charlotte speaks about Fomanda and tells Emily that she cannot help her with sister things like Amanda. Spoiler alert, I guess she means her pregnancy, since Fomanda had baby Carl. So in a way she is right, Emily could not be a counselor in raising a child. But I like Emily's idea that they will be sisters when she is her sister-in-law. That was a nice substitute for the real sister bond Emily surely wished to have someday with Charlotte. About Emily leaving when Regina comes. I still do not get it why she just goes over Charlotte's bad behavior. Maybe she wants Charlotte on her side in order to take both children away from Victoria, and a fight with Charlotte would have stand in the way of that. But I still cannot see why she gives a damn about Charlotte's problematic behavior. Okay, this kiss and the partying was not something for all alarm bells. But should Emily not be a little bit concerned about the influence this Regina girl has on her half-sister? Again, it seems like at the end of season 1 everyone who should be there for Charlotte had better things to do. Emily is plotting her revenge and Daniel has his hands full with wrapping up Grayson Global so he can plan his future life with Emily in Paris. Conrad is busy with his political campaign and Victoria throws herself into the search after her firstborn son. About Emily teasing Victoria again. I still love how uncomfortable is with Emily walking around in Grayson Manor. I do not know if she just wants to set boundaries or hurt Emily with her attitude that she should not go unannounced through Grayson Manor. Anyway, it is interesting that Emily refers to Paris not as the city of love as you would expect for a future bride, but as the city of light. By the way, I like Emily's style in this scene. She really looks like the perfect country lady with these leather boots, the brown leather bag and the green sweater under the creme blazer. Very much like Kate Middleton, who married Prince William around the time of season 1. I think that is why they put a reference to their royal wedding in, as Ashley was planning Daniel's and Emily's wedding at the end of season 1. And the comparison is not that far-fetched, since newly ricks from the East Coast always wanted to live like the old money in Europe. They were either imitating the French style like Victoria or the British lifestyle. The story about the wife of this competitive politician who tried to defend the governor's seat against Conrad was interesting. Victoria seems to be really moved by her story, and we see how different a marriage can be even in political circles. She really seems to love her husband, since she is willing to destroy his political career only to have a few more years with her man. because he has a heart disease that would make it impossible to survive another term in this demanding job. The story might be far-fetched, but some elements of it could be true. And I really like this guest star. Jessica Tuck was extraordinary as vampire in True Blood. She was one of my favorites. And here both women are great. Madeline Stowe finds the right amount of admiration for this lovely marriage and wishful thinking that this political career mean an early death for Conrad. About Nolan and Aiden again. I like where they're right now. Nolan seems to trust Aiden and is no longer afraid of him since he finally mocks him right into his face. I really loved his joke about Aiden being his bodyguard and he would be his Whitney. A funny vision. And I like how Aiden confides in Nolan. He seems to have learned to trust him, too. Though the content of the conversation is the same, this shows how different the tone can be. With Takeda, Aiden was very much aggressive and fatalistic. Here it seems he tries to recapitulate and assure himself what he thinks deep in his heart is true and right. It is some kind of sad that Aiden feels empty. I think he is still not over the death of his sister and the fact that he could not save her. Seems as if there is gonna be a long depression phase for him. Maybe that is the reason why he sees everything this gloomy and black. But I like that he brings in her father and his idea from the diaries. 'Cause he asked Amanda to forgive and not go after the people who were responsible for their fate. And Aiden is right, Nolan was never really on board with her revengenda. He always had doubts and told Emily more than once to end her revenge mission in season 1. About his idea of draining the Graysons' bank account. I think this was the worst idea Aiden had, and that Nolan cannot see it speaks not for his intelligence or good instinct. How could bankrupting the Graysons end Emily's revengenda? And more important, why do they play around with carrion when this computer program is so dangerous? Spoiler alert, I know they could not possibly know that they would play right into the cards of the initiative. But did really only Emily see how bad this idea was? About Nolan visiting the Falcon in jail. Interesting how often we see people in jail this season. In the first one it was only David in flashback and Daniel in some episodes before his trial. Here we had Conrad, Mason, Jack and Nolan being arrested, and now the Falcon. I do not like this obvious scene and her riddle with this lame salvation being her high score on that stupid computer game, but I like the intensity of this actress. She has only 2 episodes and a handful of scenes, but she still stands out like the one who portrayed Amanda's foster brother. In this season they were very lucky with the guest stars, the more a shame that they got this limited screen time, and no one besides Kara Clarke got a longer story arc. About Conrad's campaign. I liked that side plot not only because it shows how ruthless Conrad is and how ambitious to gain more power. It was interesting to see how campaigns and elections obviously work in the state. For the Americans this might not be very interesting since we got TV shows like Scandal, The Politician and House of Cards who were much more political. However, it is always interesting for me how elections are mostly influenced by this swift voting attacks in the media with TV spots or in speeches. That is something we do not have in Germany. Our TV spots and political TV duels are very much boring cause our politicians do not engage themselves in swift voting. And we have very strict rules about campaign donations, so there is not that much money involved as in the campaigns in the USA. However, when I see this TV spot about Conrad that is for me theatrics, even though I know that it would be highly likely true for a campaign in the state. About Ashley working with Jack again. As I said before, I like this pairing very much and I was not happy as Conrad sabotaged them by making it appear as if Ashley tricked Jack. Maybe it was surprisingly that she helped Jack without getting anything in return than prevent Conrad from getting governor. but they were a good team till Conrad saw what was going on. Another thing that annoyed me in season 2. Obviously the show creators were surprised that the show had been such a success and the network wanted more, so they were not prepared for a second season, which maybe was the main problem for the show in 2012. Therefore they could not know when their show would end, so they had to keep Emily failing with her revengenda. Otherwise the story and the show would be over. That is why she never got near winning against Conrad or Victoria in season 2, which made season 3 better from the start since we finally got to see her winning. Major spoiler alert, for once, by finally marrying Daniel and winning this fight against Victoria, and at the end by taking down Conrad, finally exonerate her father's name and taking revenge on Victoria. So in season 2 either Conrad or the initiative were always a step ahead of Emily and her revengeketeers, namely Aiden and Nolan, with the most hard consequences. Anyway, I like how they combined Ashley's jealousy of Emily from season 1 with her new view on Conrad in season 2. Seems as if Ashley always drops out of sight, first with Victoria and Daniel in season 1 and now with Emily and Conrad. So she has pretty good reasons for her own revenge, and I can very much relate to her motive. What she says is true. People like Conrad and Emily who get power from their money and therefore mostly get what they want are the winners in this over-capitalistic world we all live in, but they are not invincible, at least on screen. What I cannot understand why it is suddenly such a matter that Emily broke up with Daniel in season 1 over her kiss with Jack. Can Jack not see himself why she did not told him? He saw her that night and how her mood changed when Fomanda surprised her being pregnant and founding a family with Jack. He must have seen how devastated she was, and he never asked himself if she wanted to be with him, cause it was obviously off limits since he had to deal with Fomanda and becoming a father. So why is he now shocked and later wants to talk about this with Emily? I mean, he could have put 2 and 2 together since Emily and Daniel broke up after he and Emily kissed, and though I can totally understand why he tackles her for marrying into the Grayson family after everything she knows about these people, but concerning her relationship with Daniel, that is really none of his business. If he really wanted to be with Emily, he could have left Fomanda. He could have taken care of her and baby Carl without being in a relationship. Obviously he wanted to give Fomanda a second chance, which was great though its sad outcome, but he cannot blame Emily for trying to do the same with Daniel. It cuts both ways. I do not like how he criticizes her without knowing all the facts, and even because she does not tell him the whole truth. This scene is so tragic. Again, an outstanding performance of Emily Van Camp, how reluctant she is and her whole body language. Every time when she talks with Jack in season 1 and 2 she is in defense and a little bit hurt, it seems, as if speaking with him and not be able to tell him the truth causes physical pain. I think in this scene at the veranda he really breaks with her and thinks, fuck it, I am going on my own when I cannot get help elsewhere. I know they wanted this cliffhanger in the finale, but here it would have been again fitting if she paused and told him everything. Does he not have a right to know why his wife had to die? And even more to know who his wife really was? Especially when they were endgame, they should have brought a scene in where Emily tells him everything. They could have shown us how they talk in the beach house, sitting on the couch before the fire like in season 1. And when they did not want to capture the whole story again because that would have been obviously boring since the audience knows much more than Jack, they could have zoomed out through the window and just give us a wide shot of Emily and Jack talking in the beach house. That would have been much more fulfilling and far less painful than this conversation. It was frustrating seeing him and Emily fight that often after Fomanda's death. I know they could not bring the two more together because of Aiden, and a foursome would have been too much since Daniel was in the picture again. But it seems all Emily and Jack are doing is fight since the second half of the season. At the beginning they barely saw each other, and in season 3 they fight again. That was also something which made their reunion as a romantic couple even more impossible for me. Yeah, I know this funny claim that when two characters hate each other from the beginning of a show they end up together in the last season. That often works, like in Castle or The Mentalist, two THR shows I enjoyed. But in Revenge it really looked forced since the two had not such a good chemistry as other couples on the show. Now about the engagement party. I like that they stick with the tradition, only showing Victoria's speech since she is such a talent by insulting with a smile and nice words. Here again she did not disappoint me with her friendly insults. What is interesting with her speech is that they seem to prepare us for Victoria actually getting suspicious about Emily's heritage, and why she is so obviously obsessed with the Graysons, not only with Daniel. That was something I really enjoyed in the next season. This cat and mouse game with Emily and the question who is faster. The color choice of the dresses is revealing again. Victoria wearing black as if she is going to a funeral. And her wearing silver seems to allude to her new status, since she is about to marry in one of the wealthiest families of New York. If you believe the show's premise, about Emily and Victoria teasing each other on the Hollywood swing. I always loved when they used this spot for night scenes with Emily alone or in company. They obviously bank on the reminiscence of this kissing scene between Emily and Daniel in season 1 and 2. And of course the meaning of this swing for Amanda and David, with which Emily can hurt Victoria. A guilty pleasure of the show, especially in the 2 upcoming seasons. Haunting Victoria with her memories of David and how she betrayed him. But Victoria fights Emily's attacks off very elegantly by spotting that she has other reasons to marry Daniel than for love. I think she is right. In season 2 it is more obvious that Emily is not in love with Daniel. First, the timing and how fast the two got together and engaged again. You can say because it is the second time that they are more sure. But since she was so reluctant at the start, it is a bit odd to go in full speed after she finally made her mind. And trying to separate Daniel from his mother geographically and more reaching out for Charlotte, too, maybe was a little too much. Mostly I enjoyed how they both make this conversation escalate more and more with every new attack. You must admit Emily Van Camp and Madeleine Stowe are a good time in these scenes. By the way, that must have been clearly the reason why Emily wanted to celebrate their engagement in the beach house, not in Grayson Manor. And since Daniel has from the last engagement party with Tyler's murder only bad and traumatic memories, he will have not at all obliged. I like how they used a more romantic lighting with the candles and the light from the house through these white curtains. Gives the scene a bit dreamy quality, which is a good contrast to the harsh realness of their conversation. About Emily's and Takeda's fight. This scene was again very much disappointing. I do not like second season Takeda at all. Maybe because they recast him, but mostly because of his behavior. Why did he not came sooner? If he send Aiden to watch Emily and take care that her mission does not fail, why did he not interfere after everything went down? 'Cause Emily and Aiden are obviously not making a good job here. They still are not closer at the initiative and do nothing about their structure or future plans. And why was he not in contact with Aiden if he really was there to keep Emily in check or spy on her? Did Aiden break contact after he got back together with Emily? And if so, why did Takeda not show to get to know himself what was going on? Most annoying was his refusal to share information about the initiative with Emily. Did he change his mind after the conversation with Aiden? Does he want to cut both loose from his revenge plan? 'Cause till now it always seemed as if he was using Emily to his own advantage and helped Emily not only out of his good heart. And what was he planning to do? Major spoiler alert, very convenient for the writers that Aiden killed him before we knew. I did not like the scenery either. This black sky and the obvious green screen effect made the scene look a little too spooky for my taste. Aiden's fight scene with Takeda was cool, but again it felt like a whole different show. The scenes itself and how they showed how smart and dirty Aiden is fighting made me enjoy this scene. But for the story it was just claptrap to make Emily mourn the death of yet another important person in her life. The cinematography and the execution of the scene was marvelous, but I still cannot understand how Takeda, when he is mostly in Japan and both Emily and Aiden, who are grown-up people, can be held hostage by this one man. He has no bodyguards or henchmen with him, he travels, and besides a translator we have always seen him alone. And his students have become very skillful not only with mind games but with real fighting skills, as we saw in multiple scenes throughout both seasons. So how could such an old man with no backup keep Emily and Aiden from doing anything? Aiden could have just walk away and tell Emily right away what he had found out about Takeda. Maybe she would have not believed him and confronted Takeda about it. But that would it be? I do not think that Takeda would have attacked Emily like he does with Aiden in this scene. And if so, I am sure he would have regret it very fast. So despite being a pain in the ass and sabotaging Emily's and Aiden's relationship, there would have been not much he could do. The whole threat and reason for this fight is just so thin. It is even as if they want to stall time. Spoiler alert. After seeing Season 3 and Nico coming in as a new character, I now know why they had to bring Takeda back only to kill him. But I think this was really sloppy done. After all, they could have killed him being in that building to gather information or stop that henchman of Conrad and the initiative. So we would not have that big conflict for Aiden and Emily, but they still could be fighting about Takeda's motives and his little backstory. But about that later in the next episode. The only thing that would have been missing were Nico's motive for revenge. For that they could have come up with the solution, she was just believing that Aiden killed her father. Would have been easier and more understandable for her to stop her own revengenda. Since leaving after Emily almost killed her seemed more than anticlimactic in that episode in Season 3. But also more about that when we get to Season 3. 'Cause her storyline was something I enjoyed the least. Back to the actual episode here. Another thing about this season in general. It is interesting that we have many nice quotes and funny moments in this season. Maybe I will put those quotes together in a mini video series, since I have now rewatched the first 2 seasons as a whole. But not many storylines from the plot stand out. We have the story arc of Jack and Fomanda, which was really nice and fulfilling even because of that sad end. Then we had Aiden and Emily. I think his character was the only one from Season 2 who was a really meaningful addition to the cast. Then there was the backstory of Victoria with her mother and the teenage pregnancy. About Charlotte and Daniel. This scene and the one from the last episode were my favorite scenes with the two. Finally, Daniel takes responsibility and tries to help Charlotte. As I said in the pilot episode, it was pretty much obvious how they changed their relationship. In the pilot, Charlotte was so excited seeing Daniel coming back and rushed to take him into her arms. And the next episode there was zero contact between the two and Charlotte never got a proper conversation scene with Daniel. They focused solely on the relationship of the Graysons' children with their parents, and in Season 2 they merely focused on Charlotte's relationship to Victoria, since her father only used his daughter to get her inheritance, something which Charlotte surely did not forgave Conrad till Season 3. Anyway, it is an interesting choice that Charlotte first tells her brother and not Declan, who is obviously the baby's father. I could relate how she confides to Regina because it is often easier to talk with a total stranger. But why she talks with Daniel before confiding Declan? I mean, they should have sought out what to do before confiding to anyone else. And why not talk to Jack to get advice from someone who is actually a single parent right now? I guess he is busy plotting with Ashley against Conrad. But for this I think he would have took the time and it would have been much more emotional. They could have put some flashbacks about him and Amanda with baby Carl. Maybe some footage from deleted scenes or a collage from old scenes when they did not want to reshoot stuff. Anything would have been better than this half-cooked scene with Daniel. And what is worse, these scenes with Jack and Victoria. I still cannot understand why Jack is colluding with her even after Emily's warning. Is it pride and despite? Because your enemy's enemy is your friend? He surely sees Emily as some kind of an enemy, and he knows too well how Emily and Victoria despise each other. And he seems to know that Victoria hates her husband Conrad. So does he think he can use her to his advantage? Or maybe he just clutches to every straw he has left. Either way, I hated the ambiguity of this scene. We know that Victoria was part of that plan to take Amanda down, and I refuse to believe that she does not suspected how that could end for Amanda. So it is hard to stomach how she plays being unaware and innocent before Jack. I wonder what she is thinking when Jack confronts her. Does she feel guilty for running his life? Though I hate to admit it, but in this episode they really raised the stakes on every level and did a good job to prepare for the finale. Jack is in an interesting situation with Victoria. Declan has to face Charlotte's friend Regina, and Charlotte's secret is finally out. While Emily, Aiden and Nolan are in the eye of the storm. And Conrad is going to be governor. So even when I hated that story with the blackout and the bombs, they did quite a good job by putting nearly anyone in the worst position for a blackout, and with surprising fellows, too. Maybe they had only the chance to disappoint us since they brought up so high expectations. But the finale, even though it was a double episode, was really disappointing to me.